the second roundtable here at the 6th Annual Belize International Yoga Festival. I'm Jayadev Woodford, and I'm here to host this very diverse panel of folks who are coming from all over the world and all different backgrounds. So I'm so excited to get into the theme for this roundtable, which is overcome. It's the second part of the theme this year. And so we're going to talk about what obstacles have arisen for us in the last year and how we've overcome them in different ways. But before we get into that, let's just take a moment to get centered and kind of come back to ourselves. So just, find a comfortable seat and close your eyes. We'll take a few, inhaling deeply and exhaling one more time, inhaling into the space, among other things, and experience their inherent bliss nature, yoga, Himalayan Kundalini, and the yoga non-holistic full. I'm just going to go in random order, no particular order here. We'll start with Aline. She is in Montreal right now, and she is, among other things, a raw food addict and recovering addict and a single mom. And she's interested in helping people transform their lives and overcome addictions with the help of raw foods. And she can tell us more about that as we get into our discussion. And then we've got Jared from Belize, and he's a certified massage therapist, a Reiki practitioner, and a certified youth advocate at the Youth Advocacy Movement. He's also experienced in massage therapy, youth advocacy, education, sexual reproductive health awareness. And his specialties include reading with clarity, cleanliness, and consistency in recording voiceovers too. So we look forward to hearing his voice on this discussion. Yeah. He's a well-rounded individual, passionate about working with people and willing to take on any task and to learn new content. And he's really passionate about working with groups in general. So that's Jared. We've got Aman coming to us from Cambridge, UK. And he's a consultant thoracic surgeon, as well as a father, a husband, a son, a friend, a teacher, an educator, and a researcher. He's interested in exploring the question of what is the meaning of life, and it's something we can probably get into on this discussion. We've got Aria coming to us from Florida. She is another person with a lot of diverse experiences and offerings. She's working in financial services and mortgage banking, asset management, rehab management, underwriting, and that kind of thing. She's also a licensed realtor and a certified notary public in the state of Florida. And she has a master's of public administration with a concentration in project management and organizational management. And she's currently pursuing an MBA specializing in real estate at Florida State University. So that's our panel today. I'm excited to get into the discussion. So I just introduced you guys, but if you want to go around, I thought it would be, maybe you want to add anything that we should know about you. And then I'm curious to start by talking about sort of what your own spiritual practices or what your own spirituality looks like, so we can use that as a context as we get into this topic of overcoming. So anyone want to start? I can just pick somebody. Aman, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's very nice to meet you all. Just stop me if I go on for too long. That's very important. So a bit more about me. I'm by birth, I was born in North India in a city called Chandigarh, which is in the plain just below the Himalayan foothills. And I am from a place called the Punjab, which is now divided into two countries, into Pakistan and India. And they're culturally very similar. They're culturally the same, except on the Pakistani side, people are Muslims, and on the Indian side, people are Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims. And of course, you have other religions. The Himalayas are part of our world. We can see them. And whenever I go to India, we always make a visit to the low foothills and spend some time there. I came to the UK when I was 2 years old, and I've more or less lived my whole life in between London and the countryside to the northeast of London, East Anglia, where Cambridge actually is, and where I have my medical practice. The other thing you asked was about spirituality. Now, this has been a sort of journey of discovery for me. I'm not somebody who actually, like many of you, practices yoga or massage or Reiki or these other really, really effective things. But but I was brought up with those things. They were around me. They were part of the culture. They were part of the world. And so I never realized that people didn't have the sort of spiritual life that I always assumed that everybody had. And maybe you do, but I feel that I live in a space and time that is always connected spiritually. I feel that sometimes the physical world that we're in at the moment is actually just the temporary manifestation of a much bigger spirituality. And I've thought that since being a small child. And when I spoke to people about those experiences and thoughts, and those sort of came up in conversation when I was a teenager, and then talking to family, I began to realize that other people didn't always have those experiences. So that is a very brief snapshot of where I am spiritually.
Thank you for that. That's really cool. I especially like how you talk about how spirituality was just part of your environment growing up, and sort of coming to that realization that maybe that's not the case for everyone, but I feel like it is starting to be more the case for everyone slowly. And I like, it's good to hear a doctor, speaking this way, because you're sort of like in the grand tradition of like, Deepak Chopra or Andrew Weil, right? So I feel like it's encouraging to see somebody who is firmly rooted in both the spiritual world and the material world, right? Because you have to be a doctor, right? So it's nice to hear that. Yeah, sometimes. Great. Well, thank you for that. Jared, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself and your spirituality?
A little bit more about. Could you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. This is the voice now. Yeah. A little bit about me. I'm 22 years old. Was born and raised in Belize City. Sorry about that. Yeah, I have my associate's degree in computer networking. Well, like you mentioned before, I do a lot of youth advocacy work. There's this organization based here in Belize, the Belize Family Life Association. I actually was on the board of directors as their youth rep on that organization. So that's where the youth advocacy movement and everything else derived from. So yeah, for as long as I could remember, I think everything started for me at like 14. I just started like diving in and volunteering, and I was always a part of these different groups, always a part of these different advocacy groups, and my mandate has always been under the protection of women and children, especially sexual and reproductive health, bringing awareness to these different things and those different concepts as well. So that's kind of been my norm for as long as I could remember. It's just recently that I switched over to massage therapy. Actually, I got certified this year. And that's actually how I met Michelle. So one day I just like walked up in Shanti, and I was like, hey, I needed some volunteers because I needed to massage a couple people and get their opinions on it for to qualify for my exam. And she was like, yeah, go ahead. And when you're certified, you could come back and we'll use you. So ever since then, I think that was like in July, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, somewhere about mid-July. Ever since then, we kind of just kept in touch. And well, now I'm working here under her as her, in-house massage therapist. So I'm grateful for the opportunities she's exposed to me. And when it comes to my spirituality, um, I just recently got introduced to Reiki as well. So it's still kind of new to me, and I'm still practicing, of course, and still making it a part of my daily life. But just transitioning. At first, I used to be grounded in the concepts of moral philosophy, or like epistemology, that's like rooted in like knowledge, right? So kind of just disregarded metaphysics. And when I was introduced to it, and kind of just went under Miss Michelle's wing, it gave me a lot of new perspective on things. Like I started to see things a lot differently. I started to think about things a lot differently. Of course, I was like mindful, and I was more, still logical, but it showed me a lot of the concepts of spirituality. Under her, it showed me a lot of compassion. It showed me a lot of love, and for that, I am truly grateful. All right, so yeah, that's a bit about me.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I especially noticed, like, as you're talking about the moral philosophy and all that, and things that come out of the sort of like European Western philosophical tradition, it's that can be a lot of times just living in your head, and it's so important to approach things from a more of a grounded perspective that comes from yoga practice, or Reiki, and more of the energetic work and all that. So it's nice to see that you've like you're more well-rounded now in the spirituality. So that's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And then Aline, you want to say a little bit about yourself and your spirituality?
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. So good to be here. Well, my spirituality is God. I took a long detour from my beliefs. I grew up in a Christian household. We went to church when I was younger, and but by the time I was like 9 or 10, I kind of put that aside and went a different route. And it took me about 20 years to come back around, and a lot of ungodly behaviors, a lot of Christian. I mean, I don't consider myself religious per se, but I do believe in Jesus Christ as my, Savior and my Lord, that has really saved me from my addictions. At this point in time, I connect my spirituality a lot to my habits, to staying clean, to fasting, that kind of thing. I pray every day. I meditate, and I also have a yoga practice that has evolved around, along the years. But I started practicing probably around 8 years ago, and that's really when I started even having a spiritual life, like that I kind of made my own. But I was still involved in, drugs, alcohol, and, just different behaviors that was taking me away from my spiritual calling. So, but doing yoga really like awakened my Kundalini energy, and just raised me up, like started connecting me, my body, my mind, my soul. I became vegan as well 8 years ago. So that was like, I guess that was one of my first spiritual callings. I didn't really know where it came from. I was in Belize, so people thought I was crazy. What do you mean you're stopping to eat meat and stuff like that? So I had a lot of resistance from when I was living there, but I still went ahead and did it as clumsily as I could. And I realized that changing my food actually made me more connected to spirit and more connected to myself. So that's why I love to teach people about raw foods, because it really is a spiritual connection that is created, and it helped me to like awaken to myself and to my divine gifts within. So it's like, if and also to overcome my addiction. So I guess it's all interconnected, mind, body, spirit. But for me anyway, like I had to really go deep into my darkness and into like drugs and alcohol to almost die and then be saved, to even say like I believe in God. That was really hard for me to say before. So yeah, I'm in full worship, I'm in full surrender, and I do everything I can to show honor and recognition to his saving grace, because I know I didn't do it on my own. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Aline. Yeah, that's beautiful. I especially like how you have sort of integrated all these different spiritual traditions into your own kind of version that draws on Christianity and yoga, and it's ultimately all just one anyways, right? So and I also like what you're saying about how important it is for us to realize, as we continue to evolve and awaken, to think about our habits, our diet, our lifestyle, and all that. So thank you so much for bringing all that together for us.
Thank you.
And Aria, do you want to say a little bit about yourself and your practices?
Hi, thanks for the invite. I am one of the people on here that know the least about yoga, but even though I've incorporated some of the techniques, breathe often during the pandemic, but a little bit more about me. My grandmother, actually we had 3 this year with the pandemic. And I originally from Belize. I grew up in the capital in Belmopan. And I was in Belize for maybe 26 years. And then I've moved to Florida, further my education. And I got married here in Florida, and I've been here now for 20 years. A little bit more about me regarding spirituality. I am not a follower of religion per se. I grew up Catholic, very devout Catholic family. I used to go to church every Sunday. I was part of the youth group, Catholic, but as a kid growing up, I've always questioned a lot of things, traditions, different things around religion. And as a woman, part of my questioning with religion is placing women always in some less than position. It's Catholicism, women can't become priests, women can't reach a level of leadership, the highest level of leadership type like that. And so as a teenager, I kind of journeyed reading about different types of religion. I read about Rastafarianism. I read about the Muslim religion, different types of Christianity, even evangelical, a little bit about yoga. I don't know much about yoga, I'll be very honest. But the central theme to me really around a lot of religion has always been indoctrination, rather than freeing people, rather than getting the best out of people. I believe in God, let me say that. I pray every day. I believe in people, power. I believe in spirituality. I think that people can elevate beyond different circumstances, and I feel a connection that, like the good doctor said, there's meaning to life. It's bigger than we realize. We just in this small space, and whatever we're exposed to, we think we can figure it out, but it's such a big world, it's such a big planet, it's such a big universe, that I think that our spirituality is really what connects us as humans. We can feel other people's pain, we can feel different things, and it says that there is a current of spirituality that is running through the world, that many times we haven't captured as yet as people. So that's just a little bit about who I am.
Thank you for that, Aria. Yeah, that's it's, it's so great because even though this is a yoga festival, we obviously everything's yoga, and we're open to all traditions. And I really like what you said about believing in people power. Your spirituality is it sounds very sort of like compassionate and human centered, which is so beautiful. And I just want to say too, I apologize for any background noise. I'm in Brooklyn in New York City, and it's quite noisy behind me, so apologies for that. But I also wanted to mention too, before we get to the next question, you can drop comments and questions into the chat on the live stream, and we can try to find time to answer those too. But let's just get right into the heart of the discussion today, which is talking about this past year for us and obstacles that we've encountered and how we've overcome those, or rose above those, or or came to see or came to understand that those are actually opportunities, right? So who wants to go on and start on this topic? Anybody have an experience they want to share from this past year? You want to talk about how this past year has been for you? I'm sure it's been trying for all of us in different ways. Should I pick somebody? Aline, you look like you're ready to say something.
I was gonna volunteer. Yeah, no problem. I'll share.
Okay.
Well, this last year has been, oof. I have moved 4 times in the last year. So I'm back in Montreal. I was in Mexico in November of last year. So I went from Mexico back to Belize. We have a resort in the jungle of Belize called Mariposa Jungle Lodge in San Antonio. So I came from Mexico. I went to Mariposa, back to work for a few months. Actually struggled through a very bad relapse in July of last year. So I had to leave Belize, leave my daughter. So my dad had to go pick her up from Belize, and with everything with COVID and all that, it was pretty hectic. We have to quarantine here when we come back to Canada. It was a pretty big deal. So he went to go get her. I went to Austin, where I go for healing, because there's a really beautiful healing community there, and sober houses and things like that. So I had been in the past. So I went back to Austin for a few months before coming back to Montreal. So it has been a few ups and downs to this place of like full acceptance of my condition, my situation, what I need to do to fully recover, and what not to do, really, to like protect myself. So I put in place some daily practices. I got super serious about, I mean, I had been serious about my health before, but really the last year has been my major up level in terms of switching from any kind of junk food to like the highest frequency foods only, because I suffer with depression, because I suffer with anxiety. I really didn't want to take any kind of medication. I had taken them in the past, so I really had to like shift my focus more towards like the plant medicine, towards the fruits and the cleansing and all that. I had done some juice cleansing before. I did 113 days last year, which really helped me clear out my gut. And this year I went on a water fast, which like completely changed my life. So I did a 23-day water fast back in September of this year. And I mean, the amount of healing that I've done, I got like a lot of parasites out. I cleared my mind, my whole body. Like it was just a total surrender to God. At some point I thought I was going to die. I didn't die, but it was like, that to me was a true connection to my higher power. And then I came back to Montreal to be with my daughter. So I did 3 months of treatment and healing over there. And yeah, it was just, for me, this whole year was about like, how do I find bliss? How do I find my joy, and how do I serve? Because I knew I had felt the call to help, to serve, to step into my leadership, to do that. And I was like stuck in fear. I was really stuck in my fears. I was playing small, And this last relapse was like, you cannot play small anymore. The world needs you. You need to help. You need to help people fast. You need to help people cleanse and really turn their hearts over to, their higher power. And I mean, I had been doing it for the last few years. I've always had a, kind of philanthropist heart. I've always wanted to help, but it was like not aligned with what I really needed to do. And in order to do that, I really had to align myself. So I went completely raw vegan. I cut out all vegan junk food, all cooked foods, all cooked starches, oils, and that kind of stuff. And it really helped me up level to my highest frequency possible. Do I have bad days sometimes? Yes, I'm not, I'm still human, but I'm a long way from wanting to kill myself and using, in a nutshell.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I especially like what you said about full acceptance. I think acceptance of yourself, and I love how you talked about how finding ways to serve, because I think eventually on the spiritual path, you start to think less about yourself and more about how you can help other people, right? So that's a great place to take us. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Who wants to go next to share their experience this year, the ups and downs, the obstacles?
I can volunteer next.
Go ahead, Aria.
Aria? Okay, Aria, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, since the pandemic, it was a bit trying. I told you, I did a lot of research when the pandemic started from these different doctors. And so it was the first time in my life I experienced anxiety. I've never experienced that ever before, to be honest. And then my very good friend died. He was one of the first people to die in Belize from the pandemic. And that shot my anxiety to a very high level, because I do have a son who has asthma and has a lot of respiratory issues. And so it really bothered me to the point where I couldn't sleep. And what I decided to do, I honestly had to pray on this. I decided to take one day at a time. What scared me about the pandemic is this thing that they tell you, it could be in your system, but it'll take 2 weeks to show up. And so it was almost like you were living in these 2 weeks bubbles, wondering whether or not this would affect you. And so that's when the first time I used yoga, I actually started Googling ways to deal with anxiety, because I don't want to go on medication. And there was this, I can't remember her name, but she was online and she did all these breathing exercises and to relaxation exercise. And it really worked. It really was a very effective tool. Also, me and one of my friends, we started this online civic fellowship program for kids in Belize, because everything was online. We took advantage of it. And so we did this education program with like 50 kids. And we taught them, we brought in doctors, we brought in people who are leaders in the community to discuss politics, different things, just to give them some informational power during that time. And I find that being occupied, I also started this workout program that perfectly worked until my first grandbaby was being born. And then my anxiety shut up again, because the mom had a lot of issues with the birth. So again, that when Aline was talking about relapse, you go back to some of those bad habits when you are in stress or distress. So it did teach me a lot. It taught me about alternative ways to deal with stress. It taught me to use my power to empower others. And it taught me that it's not there. You can always go back to doing the right things, even when you fall short of or when you relapse. So that was my experience during that time.
Thank you for that, Aria. That was a beautiful reflection. It's been hard. I think we all know people who have been affected by COVID or have died. I have some people in my life who have passed away from COVID, and it can be really, really anxiety inducing. And so I totally understand where you're coming from. And I loved how, the pandemic is an opportunity for all of us to define practices that are going to help us and to help other people. And I just love the way you were curious and went about doing that in terms of prayer and taking it one day at a time. That sounds so simple, but this pandemic, I think, has forced all of us to learn how to just be so in the present and to surrender. And so much of what you're saying reflects that, I think. And yeah, the power of pranayama, especially for anxiety, is huge. And I hope, we're experiencing that here in the festival too, and other practices, other sessions. But yeah, thank you for all of that. Aman, you had something you wanted to share, right?
Oh, well, yeah, hi, thank you. Can I just mention, I've really so much enjoyed hearing Aline's and Arya's experiences, and I'm very, very touched and very moved by them and very impressed. It's amazing. So what I'd like to sort of tell you about is my journey in the last year. I'm a practicing surgeon. I deal with some very sick people with lung cancer. But as it turns out, I probably had COVID before we knew it was COVID. I went through China in 2019 and came down with what you'd clinically identify as COVID 10 days later. And I was in contact with people who were coughing in front of me. And my illness was a sort of 3-month illness, and I was, short of breath, but I also had a lot of abdominal problems, and we know that COVID is a multi-system disease. And one of the enduring things for that was this incredible sense of fatigue that just went on, and we're now more than 2 years since I had those symptoms, and I also deal with a lot of COVID patients, and I actually have to operate on people who've got COVID and who are dying of COVID. And in that very, very sick group, 2/3 of them are actually going to die. And this year has been one of which a few weeks ago, I actually felt I was a completely different person. And when I was a little kid, I had a different name. It wasn't Aman. And by the way, Aman is an old Sanskrit word for peace. And I was renamed that a few weeks after my birth, because when I was born, India and Pakistan were having one of these sad wars. And my first name was Jung Bahadur, and which translates roughly to somebody who's very violent and a great warrior. And the name was probably used on both sides. But my parents decided that wasn't right. But it's not actually about being a warrior or anything like that. But I actually felt that I was almost reborn. And this year, what I have been doing is I have been really accepting of the moment. And if something's not going to plan, if somebody is giving me a hard time, if the patient is not doing well, I just have this sense of acceptance. And that has been hugely helpful to me. And I actually have stopped feeling anxious. I've stopped feeling worried. What will be, providing I can do my best. And this sort of semi-spiritual world that I have, and it's there. I feel very fortunate at the moment because it's stronger than it's been for a while. And I have these experiences whereby I feel that what is outside of our day-to-day existence is a feeling of love. And maybe that's what people mean by bliss, but I actually feel that we are connected by this feeling of love. And it's a wonderful thing. It really is. And if somebody gives me a bit of a hard time, I actually feel that I actually want to, not in some kind of crazy way, but I actually think that, okay, you're being like that because something's not right with you, or for you, and how can I help make that better? And by putting that into your day-to-day actions, I find that people's responses become better. So this has been my journey for this year, where I've improved my own health and have become something of a different person. And by allowing that into my life, there we go.
Thank you so much for that. That was so great. Can I ask, I mean, how would you describe yourself before, if I can ask that?
Well, I would say a year ago, I was physically much less well than I am now, much less well.
Right.
I was mentally, I was not coping as well as I am now with the concept of COVID. The constantly having it presented to me with very, very sick patients. It could be me, it could be a member of my family next, was constantly there. And I'm much more accepting of that now. If it is, it is. There is nothing that you can do, and other than carry on doing the best that you can do in your day-to-day work and life.
Yeah, that's such a wise perspective. You know, I especially liked what you said about rebirth this year. I think in a lot of ways it's been a year of rebirth for all of us, right? I certainly feel that way, and it's been deep and beautiful. And I think that is it's a process that's important to go through maybe in life too, you know, at some point. And then what you said about love just reminded me of, I mean, this is a large part what yoga is all about, as you may know, you know, coming from India. And by the way, I've been to Chandigarh, so it's beautiful, and it's really good food too. Just to put that out there. But yeah, this idea that comes from traditional yoga, that especially the tantric tradition in Kashmir, which is not too far from there, is this idea that the cosmos is creating itself basically as an act of love. You know, so every experience that we're having in life is basically the cosmos or God or whatever you want to say is just that, is loving us, you know, or we're being held in love, even if that experience seems painful or is extremely challenging. You know, ultimately, as Anand, I think his name has been mentioned a few times today, our teacher Anand says that, you know, everything is ultimately an act of love, including pain itself. And so I think what you're talking about reminded me of that, and it just sounds like you personally have gone through such an enormous transition, and it's just, yeah, it's especially because it all started with you getting what's probably the COVID. It sounds like very early on, when the symptoms were, I think, in a lot of ways much worse or much more varied, and yeah, so that sounds like the whole experience was extremely challenging. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and this idea of how it sounds like you're saying too, shifting into an orientation of compassion towards people can totally change the dynamic and cause them to then sort of be different too, right? Like it's like compassion is like a superpower in that way. So,
well, I think you're absolutely right, and I think if somebody comes to you with stress or anxiety or hostility, I think responding in a kind of measured way, not reacting with the same emotions and affect that they may have, but actually approaching it with a sort of gentle curiosity. You know, what not, you don't even need to say, well, what is the problem? You just need to understand that there's something driving them to that. And I think feeling that within yourself and projecting it out, you can often produce a calming effect. And that's what I mean about sharing it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I want to make sure we have time for Jared to tell us a little bit about his year and ways he's overcome. So Jared, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, the past 2 years have been very interesting. Like I mentioned before, I was like very grounded in the whole concepts of moral philosophy. So it was always me clinging to morality and coming up with my own philosophies and my own reflections and measuring people based on my experiences, which in the end I realized that that's not the way to go, right? But it took me going through all that to get to where I'm at right now, and I'm grateful for it. Um, I wouldn't say that I went through like anything tragic or anything difficult or anything out that I felt like I couldn't handle or anything like that. So really and truly, it's like there wasn't really anything outside or external to uh, pose a challenge to me. So it's kind of like I became my own enemy, and I became sort of my own block, because the mind, to me, the mind works in weird ways. We always put ourselves, I feel like sometimes we just put ourselves in a position to like solve a problem. Like there is no problem, but like a dog likes chewing bone, the mind likes solving problems. Then, if there's no problem to solve, then we'll probably just go and find some problem to solve or create something that requires, the solving of that problem. And I feel like that's how it was for me. And it that essentially boiled down to me kind of overcoming myself, because I had to do a lot of reflecting inwards. I had to assess my ego. I had to look at my super ego, all of these different concepts, all of these different ideas or elusive concepts that I associated myself with. And it was just me clinging to myself. And in the end, I realized that, it really doesn't matter how much we cling to self or how much we cling to an idea or a belief system. Um, you know, it, there's, in the end, there's only one destination for us. And it's more, to me, earning the right to, take that last breath, or to say that I think it's Aristotle, that I live the good life. So truly earning that, or doing what you feel is right, or living with love and living with compassion. Those are sort of the values that I ended up starting to prioritize, or I'm still learning and still growing, and still each day poses its new challenge. But those are just some of the things that I grew into. I know, like a while back, I felt like I was consumed with hatred, or I was always anxious, or I had anxiety. And then I thought to myself, if I could be angry, I could be focused. And if I could be anxious, I could be excited. And there's always like an extreme, there's always like a scope. And it's either the negative or the positive. It's just, you know, how you choose to output that emotion, or how you choose to act on that emotion. And then eventually I started seeing like little video clips or like different quotes along the way that lined up with some of my new belief systems, you know, after the fact. So it's like, okay, maybe I'm going in the right direction, kind of thing. So yeah, that's basically been how things were on my end for like the past 2 years, or this year especially. It's just been a lot of constant growth and a constant assessing and reassessing and reflecting, and just always, you know, making sure that you have your core values at the top, and measuring and assessing those core values properly, of course, because you could have good values and you have like crappy metrics to measure those values, so it doesn't really balance out. And it's just taking all of those things into account, and being patient and compassionate with yourself as well. I think all of these things starts with, you know, ourselves, essentially. And if we're able to be patient and compassionate and show ourselves love, then, you know, we would go out into the world with that same notion. So yeah, that's basically my story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That reminds me of what you're saying about the tendencies of the mind. Reminds me of this famous sort of hypothetical that a philosopher talked about. I forget who it was now, but basically the idea is that, you know, if we were taken, we were put into paradise or utopia, and all our problems went away and everything was taken care of for us, and we could just sit by the pool and, you know, drink cocktails or whatever, that would last for like a few days, and then people would start to create problems, or the mind
Right.
create drama. Yeah, so kind of what you're saying. So yeah, even if I think, yeah, what you're saying is so true for everyone. Like, we've all become more isolated with the pandemic too, and so it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
There's something else, and then through different practices, elevating them to a higher expression. We talk a lot about that in the yoga, like you were talking about. Yeah, cool. Well, we're almost at the end of the time, but does anyone have anything else they want to share, or a reflection on somebody else's share that they want to offer? No? Okay. Well, it's been such a great discussion, and I really enjoyed hearing everyone's story. I think it can help all of us to hear other people's story and other people's experience, and to have you guys join the panel. And I want to thank Michelle, especially, but the whole team with the yoga festival. I've got a little glimpse behind the scenes, and I've seen how much work it is, and I just it's such a labor of love from them, and I just want to offer thanks to all of them. And it's too bad we couldn't be in person for this, of course, but it's also nice that we can maybe have more voices, more people joining because of the remote nature of it too. So, you know, it's all for the best, probably, as always. And you know, integrating yoga and integrating plant medicine experiences with yoga. But I wanted to say too that it's really good for everyone. I mean, you don't have to be working with plant medicine. You know, it's a practice that can really help with anxiety and with integrating any kind of intense experience. So just putting that out there for tomorrow. But yeah, thanks again to everybody, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the festival.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the
Lovely to meet
opportunity.
you all.
So great to meet you too. Thank you so much for
Yes.
organizing this. Everybody that worked behind the scenes and right here is really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you to everybody. So good to see you all. All right.
Okay.
Hari Om and Namaste.
Namaste.